uh, technology stuff. Mm. So, okay, what should we do? Don't show this again. No. Ta-da. Sometimes you have to just, once you move your chair, Mason, I don't know why they're so close together, each row.
It's pretty extreme.
Mm. How are you tonight?
How are you?
I'm good. Okay, so let's just take a moment to get kind of quiet in our minds by bringing our attention to our bodies. Let yourself let go of whatever conversation you're having, whatever conversation you're having. If it's in the past, future, or even right now, just kind of let your awareness take in everything that it takes in. Just notice the tactile sensations that your body's experiencing. Experience the temperature of the room on your skin. The sounds in the room. And then the sensation of the breath going in and out of your body. Take a moment to rejoice in what's going well, you could say, or just, what's working. You're breathing, so your lungs are working, those automatic things that go in the body are working. If you're here, you're probably not sick. But just allow yourself to be aware of all the good conditions you have right now. Even just the free time to do something you choose to do. And see if you can recall anything that you thought, said, or did today that was in line with your motivation this morning, or that's in line with what you understand about the teachings that you're trying to put into practice. And rejoice. Rejoice in all the positive things that have happened around you today by all the other sentient beings. And allow yourself to feel how wonderful it is that every moment of the day, there are countless positive actions of body, speech, or mind that are occurring. And this is a manifestation of our Buddha nature. We can feel 100% confident that right at this moment, someone is doing something kind for someone else. Someone's being generous, patient. Someone's helping. And it's not just one person, it's many. And it's not just humans. How wonderful it is. That part of our existence can be measured in kindness. Now bring the reason that you decided to come to class today or tonight and try to generate a positive motivation, a good intention to use this time well. And we'll recite the 7-limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. Dedicate our own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. And the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so do we know each other? Let's see, we have Tal at home, Debbie, Margaret, and Natalia, Natalia and Leo. Here we have Mason, Deepa, Jack, Bob, Roy, Julie. Welcome. All right. And Sheen. Just to pick. So, okay. All right. So what we're doing is trying to kind of look at the entire path as taught in the Gelu Tibetan tradition, because that's the only one I got. And that's what this center is part of, is the foundation of preserving the Mahayana teachings in the Tibetan tradition. So, but so that we can kind of, like, if you're familiar, the hope is that you're somewhat familiar with Buddhism. I mean, that's not just brand new to you, but even if it is, we'll work with that. But to take our understanding and step back and try to put it into context of all the teachings, because it can be easy to get sucked into one topic and like forget everything about every other aspect of the path, So it's good to learn how to fit the pieces of the path together, so you understand that they work together and they don't contradict each other, although they may appear to at times. But but the more you understand how the pieces fit together, well, for me, it develops some confidence in the path, and it just helps us find our way to have a balance of, not to be so tight with one aspect of our practice that it kind of just dampens some other practice, like, if we're really trying to develop our concentration, we might really lose our patience with every noise in the house, and so, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm supposed to be meditating here, not hating my, family members for making noise or getting annoyed with my cat for climbing in my lap or something. But, so that when those kinds of thoughts arise, you can relax, laugh at yourself, and let it go. But but also, it's just, I found that after I'd studied, more in depthly the whole path, I've really had at the end of it all, even though I didn't understand it all, but I had to take an exam. And so I had to take an exam on all of it. So we reviewed everything, we didn't have any idea what would be on the exam. And it was really, it's like you go back over your notes of the old test and you're kind of going, oh, I'm starting to get this. So it was a pleasant surprise. Sometimes not so much, because you kind of go, no, I still don't get this. But I really had more confidence in how the path works, And one of my favorite things to do is to look at the qualities of a Buddha, what the teachings say are the qualities of a Buddha, and see what would be needed to become that, so that's how I kind of made sure I thought the path made sense. If you were to be enlightened, what does that mean? And then how would you get there? Because sometimes, you hear these things about, the way a bodhisattva mind works or an enlightened mind works, and you're kind of like, whoa, but if you look at where you're aiming for and see the qualities of that, you realize, oh, well, it's necessary. Like Buddhas have perfected all their qualities and are able to spontaneously and effortlessly help as soon as the conditions are there. Anybody, any sentient being, insects, animals, people, and wherever they are in the universe. So, what does that mean? How did they do that? What are the qualities of the mind?
Clarity.
Okay, what does the clarity get at?
Right, having the right view, not having a disturbed mind.
The clarity is the fact that the mind is able to reflect whatever is in its awareness.
Pure awareness.
And
no
accurately.
conceptualization.
Because since an enlightened mind has removed all the pollution, all the things that are all the wrong consciousnesses, it's an accurate reflection of whatever's in the mind. Well, an enlightened mind can know exactly how to help any sentient being. How does it do that?
Gotta be clairvoyant.
Omniscient.
Well, yep. How does he? What does that mean? How? Okay, so what is it about the quality of a mind that allows that the faculty of omniscience?
There's no obscuration.
How does that happen? If there's no obscuration, what does that mean?
Wisdom of realizing emptiness.
That doesn't help.
No.
There's no interference.
There's no interference. How can there be no interference? How does that mind know my mind right now?
There's no separation between the mind.
There's no separation. An enlightened mind is everywhere all the time. All enlightened minds are present everywhere. So when you see these images in prayer, sometimes like there's, I don't know, countless Buddhas on every pinhead. They have much prettier language than that. This is why. Okay, so we need to remember that we're bound by cyclic existence due to the pollution of our mind. It keeps us trapped in a very gross body. Our mind's not able to just be everywhere. Okay, but that's not the fault of the mind. That's the fault of our pollution of our minds, our ignorance. An enlightened mind doesn't have that. So it's free to be everywhere, and it is without effort. It just is everywhere. It knows everything in every moment that, as it arises, just, simultaneously. So it's not just pervading me, it's pervading all of you, it's pervading all the chairs, it's pervading everything. Wow. That's a cool thing to be able to do. This is part of our quality of mind. This is something that our mind can do when it's free from the constraints of ignorance. Our ignorance grasps at a self, and so it makes ourselves very, very physical, very, it looks like it's this individual thing that's solid, that changes very, very slowly over time, all this kind of stuff. That's an effect of the way we grasp at the self.
There's something.
Yep.
So I come from an Islamic tradition,
Okay.
and so we have mysticism that talks about being a God particle, and they describe it as there is this ocean that just is endless, and if you imagine that this is God, you are a drop of this ocean, and so no matter how small you are, but you have all the qualities of this ocean, and that's how you are the same as God.
Okay.
Is this?
It's similar, but it's not the same, because we are not the same as a Buddha or an enlightened mind at this moment. We have the capacity to be the same, but we have to remove our mistaken ways of thinking, our mistaken ways of holding how things exist. We don't see things as they actually exist. And I don't know about Islam. I didn't study comparative religions. So enlightened beings are not always enlightened. Enlightened beings start just like everybody else. They're full of ignorance, they're grasping, and they figured out a way to liberate themselves from wrong thinking. So there's nobody that starts like a god in Buddhism.
It's the same concept. You might be from that ocean, but you don't necessarily are aware and see it until you remove all the pollutants.
Yeah, so that in that way it's similar. And enlightened beings don't create anything. They just know what is. So then they didn't create our universe. Our universe of all this mess that we've got with wars and pollution and just all the things you can think of that are not really great. And we might have disagreements about what those are, but in general, are created by our actions that are negative or ignorant, that are wrong. And they create the cause for the problems that we experience. We create them, and then we have the results. Enlightened beings have stopped doing that because they no longer have mistaken ideas about how we exist or how existence exists. In order to be able to help us, they have to have no obstacles to being able to know. And so this is, this is one of those things to remember when we talk about, when we say prayers, that we're trying to just bring ourselves closer to enlightened beings. And that just because enlightened beings pervade us, we can't get any closer than that. But we don't know that. And so we're trying to loosen our grasping at the way things appear, and instead use the information that we're given about how enlightened beings exist, to help us understand what's possible. So Buddhas are omniscient, so so they don't just have mere clairvoyance and you can develop clairvoyance through concentration, But you have to, you know, like until you're a Buddha, you have to turn your mind to whoever's mind, you know, you have to bring that person to mind to be able to have insight into their minds. Buddhas don't have to do that because they're pervading everything. The last moment of a bodhisattva cannot do that. It can do a lot, but it has to remove that whatever final pollution there is that's preventing full enlightenment in order to be able to pervade all things all the time in every moment. That makes sense? I mean, it doesn't have to make sense in the sense that, but if you're omniscient and you can help everybody effortlessly, spontaneously, in a, you know, what would that mean? It means you don't have to travel anywhere to get to help. You know, you don't even have to manifest anything to know what is needed. You know in the moment that need arises. Not just yours, everybody's. Yeah.
Would this apply to like the whole universe, not just Earth? Because
I'm sorry.
would this awareness apply to like the universe?
All universes, whatever universes
I'm
are.
just trying to understand how like emptiness can be held in one hand and then like this
There's nothing
material
to hold in emptiness.
as a figure of speech.
Well, that's can be a problem. Okay.
Yes. The same consciousness experiences emptiness, but it also experiences other people.
Conventional reality.
Yeah.
It doesn't
conventional
experience, so this is it. It doesn't experience emptiness. Emptiness is an absence of something. Okay. So yes, it knows that things don't exist the way they appear. You know, so it has that experience of the absence of inherent existence. But at the same time, it is aware of all the appearances to ordinary beings, because it knows the minds of all ordinary beings. And I don't know how that's done. Bodhisattvas can't do that. Not that I'm a bodhisattva, but bodhisattvas can't do that. Only an enlightened mind can do that. That's one of the distinctions between a 10th ground bodhisattva and a Buddha.
I'm sorry, what is the exact explanation or description of a bodhisattva?
Bodhisattva is someone who has created a mind that's under the influence of the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings all the time. It becomes a main mind.
So a student of the way, somebody who has the
It's someone who's
intention.
actualized some of the teachings. So it's no longer just a understanding of why that'd be a good idea. It's an actual, every moment of their mind is influenced by this desire to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. They call them child of the Buddhas, or children of the Buddhas. Okay. Once again, I've got 17 million things open. You can't find the one I want. Oh. So if the teachings are correct, that in order to be able to develop a mind that can remove all its pollution, remove all, be able to see reality as it is, requires an ability to be focused on its object of mind without any distraction, without any pause. Does that make sense? that it takes that kind of concentration to be able, I mean, because we all look at our own minds. How still is it? For how long? But we have that capacity. But so when we talk about the stages of the path, the steps, there's a lot of meditation on it. So everybody, wherever, whatever level they're on, has, you know, there are all these topics to reflect upon. So the 3 higher trainings are this, you know, the practice of ethics, concentration, you know, or concentration, contemplation, and meditation. So the differences of those levels of concentration, well, that's not right. Ignore that whole sentence. Study, contemplation, and meditation. Okay, so studying is listening to the teachings, reading the teachings, you know. Contemplation's thinking about them, you know, trying to understand them, making sure you understand them. And when you think you've understood them, then you meditate on them. So what's the difference between contemplation and meditation?
Contemplation, you're not quieting the mind. In meditation, you are trying to quiet the mind.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, in contemplation, you're not quieting the mind. And in meditation, you are trying to quiet the mind.
And not necessarily, I mean, that's not quite a clear distinction to me. So in contemplation, you are quieting your mind in that you're not thinking about just everything that comes to mind, right?
Right.
You're contemplating on a particular point.
Right.
Okay. So that requires some quieting of the mind.
Correct.
Okay. Meditation, you're trying to settle your mind on that point, whatever conclusion you come to, you know, you kind of go, oh, okay. It makes sense that if we've all existed since beginningless time, you know, there's never been a beginning or an end to our consciousness, of our awareness, that we would have had many mothers. This is a classic, you know, meditation on trying to develop the mind that wants to benefit all sentient beings. So over that span of time, we'd have everybody has been our mother. And we've been everybody's mother, we've been everybody's father, we've been everybody's friend, we've been everybody's enemy, because we've had time, you know. And then you get a sense of that, of what that means, why you go from that to remembering the kindness of mothers, remembering, you know, and developing affection for them, generating the mind that wishes them to be happy, generating the mind that wishes them to be free from suffering, and then generating that highest intention to wish to benefit them all by becoming enlightened. Okay, so anywhere along there, hopefully you have some shift in reading words or thinking about the words or thinking about the reasoning of that, to where you have this, feeling that maybe it's true, you know, that goes deeper, like if something shifts in your heart. Then when you're meditating, you stop there. And then you're just trying to have that, you're trying to truly experience that experience. So you're not thinking about it. So it's one of these things where your mind in contemplation, you want it to be, you know, you want to, you know, come to some sort of, kind of thought. And then you really want to pause it every time you have one of those kind of thoughts and try to quiet your mind further and just kind of feel that experience as opposed to thinking about that experience. all those aha moments, you know. So when we talk about single pointed concentration, it's that kind of thing where you've just narrowed it down to one point and you stay there. And what's the difference between experiencing and knowing? As in intellect.
Experiencing is non-conceptual.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's where you want it to be. It's non-conceptual. It's a direct. So when you look at something like the blue of your shirt, okay, that first instant of contact with the blue of your shirt, I have a direct perception of that blue. The second instant, I might think, oh, I like that color blue. We've gone off into so now I'm thinking about it, right? I'm not just having this direct experience.
You want to expand that first moment for as long as possible without getting involved in a story.
You just want to rest there.
Being aware of it and just resting in
It's like what I think artists or people who are docents at museums do. They allow themselves to experience the art for, they'll sit there for a very long time, looking at a painting. And then they may investigate parts of it, but they also try to experience whatever it is they're experiencing from the painting. That's the only example I can think of what it might be like, of just this, of direct perception of our sound and sight and, like a musician probably has an experience at the symphony, yeah.
Is experience an activity as opposed to knowing is just being?
No, I would say what experiencing is that awareness of what is. That's what I'm trying to get at. And it's hard to try to get at it.
But when you know something, isn't that the same thing? Like,
Depends on how you're using the word. This is my point. Okay, so we can know the names of all the presidents of the U.S. We can learn them. I mean, probably we all had to at some point in school, when you were very little.
less presidents for me to remember.
Yes.
But is there a distinction between know and knowing?
Only grammatically.
Really?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's my point. So what I'm trying to get at, though, is we really do want the experience of the verb, not just the knowledge. When we're contemplating, we're using that knowledge and we're trying to increase our knowledge and our understanding of whatever the topic is. And then we want to go further, or if we actually then have an experience of knowing or an experiencing, not just a intellectual reasoning, that's a way in which we can integrate the teachings into our being. Yep.
So I try to meditate like this in this way.
Okay.
This weekend I meditated on patience and more than just contemplation. And I don't know if this is the right path, but I just thought of the word patience and I just kind of repeated it over and over in my head until I kind of just let go of it. And then I just let myself experience whatever I experienced. Then when I got out of the meditation where I was sitting, like everything suddenly felt like I didn't have like as much craving to like, I need to rush to get somewhere. I need to, it just was like I had a different perspective once I was done.
Or maybe you had a different experience.
Yeah. Different. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that may be an experience of patience with oneself. In other words, you're going at your pace. You don't have to jump up and do, you allowed yourself to have, your meditation, your contemplation, then your meditation. And then afterwards, the effect of that is that you had interrupted that habit energy of always pushing to the next thing.
Yes, I was able to look at it like a blade of grass for like in 30 minutes without
Yeah.
any craving or feeling a need to like move on.
And I don't know if that's patience, you know. Huh?
It's focus.
It's focus, no question about focus. And it's like working on and non-distraction. The reason why I don't know if it's about patience is because nothing's trying to harm you. So patience is the mind that accepts the harm being done and does not retaliate. In Buddhism, that's what it means. So being able to sit still is this ability of focus and non-distraction. You're not letting things pull you to something else. You're focused on whatever you've chosen to focus on. And that's an excellent practice.
Yeah,
And
there's people walking by like while I was there.
Yeah.
I was sat in the middle of the trail. There's people, and I was still okay. But yeah, I don't know. The difference between what came up was focus for me when I focused on patience for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, yeah.
I guess I see patience personally as that seeing the reality of time and like the illusion of time, and kind of like there's no that kind of is an illusion. So that's how I saw
That time is kind of an illusion. And yet we think we don't have enough. So. So one of the main tasks, if we're aiming to have a mind that can know or experience, that knows the mind of others, know exactly how to help, all those kind of things. Focus is incredibly important. That like when you're, the cool thing about an enlightened mind is it can help many beings all at once, right? Because it's everywhere and it's just a cool thing. Anyway, but for you and I, the ability to stay focused on one person, one being that you're trying to help, like you're having a conversation with someone, or you're listening to someone, being able to develop your ability to stay on that person, on those words, on whatever, whatever way you're present for them, takes concentration. So that so one of the things you're trying to do is not, every time you think, oh, now I'm thinking about something else. I'm planning my afternoon, and you come back and you try to, listen again. That develops our ability to focus on one object and also to choose which object, whether we, if you want to benefit someone, you have to notice what they need. You have to provide a condition to find out what that is. So you can't just jump to conclusions and hear a few phrases and then go, oh, I can fix that for you. It's different from that, right? You have to truly listen.
This a lot of this translate into what I do or what I read about doing in meditation.
That's what meditation does. It helps you to develop that focus.
And
It helps you to listen to the teachings. Well, of course.
Right.
The whole point of meditation is to change our mind and our actions of body and speech outside of meditation. The point is not getting good at sitting on a cushion.
It helps develop that single pointed
Yeah, of course it does.
concentration, which
That's its purpose.
we want to say it's a muscle. Well, the more you exercise that muscle in meditation, the more it works.
That's exactly right. It's whatever you become familiar with, you do,
Changing your habit.
you know. Yeah, and meditation is the tool that we can use to develop this skill. You know. So figuring out how to be comfortable with the practice of allowing your mind to settle on a topic or an object and be able to tolerate it jumping around, and you just keep pulling it back. And then you're noticing that I'm staying there. And so you don't chase something new. You know, if a thought arises, you just don't follow it. It doesn't no longer disturbs you. It no longer distracts you from the object. These are our tools to practice developing our faculty of mind. You know. And they're necessary in order to be able to develop even just the desire to benefit all sentient beings. Not the result of being able to benefit, but even the desire. How often do you think when you're focused, I mean, when you're just going through your day, that self-interest pops up? You know?
Self-cherishing
Well, just
drives us all the time.
yeah, and so when we're aware of that exercise of not following that mind and trying to recall, that's what mindfulness is, to remember, oh yeah, it's not my self-interest I want to focus on. I want to see how I might be of benefit to the others around me. So to be able to develop a mind that's influenced by that thought in every moment of mine, we have to overcome our habit of self-interest in every moment. So again, focus is helpful. And not just focus, though. We have to remember that, this is a path to happiness, which has self-interest in it. Oh, I wanted to mention, just before I forget, when somebody asked about that a beginner, is aiming for at least a good rebirth.
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, and then, and we brought up the issue of whether or not it's selfish to just want a good rebirth, and you said you didn't think it was selfish, and we were talking about the heading out a path, blah, 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 all that stuff. Okay, I was trying to think of how can you look at it? Well, it's really self-care. We need to develop our own welfare in order to benefit anyone else, So it's sort of like our bodhicitta motivation is accomplishing our own welfare so that we can be of benefit and accomplish the welfare of others.
And that sounds selfish too.
That sounds self-interest.
What?
I know, I mean,
Get precise.
I want to be enlightened because, well, for the benefit of all, because I know that I have to be for the benefit of all if I want to be enlightened. Seems kind of selfish. Also, because I'm going to benefit first.
How can you help others if you don't take care of your own mind first? I mean, this is why, well, and so we have to see the reasoning behind that self-care is not selfish.
guess that's it. Yeah, I guess that's a bad
So
word.
that's why the Theravada isn't selfish, it's self-care, but it's not enlightened.
Well, it's different.
I know you said you can't really translate one to the,
Yeah, because we don't know what they're taught in their motivation. What we have to do is when we're reading the Mahayana text is understand they're really trying to emphasize to their students who are on, who've chosen, have an affinity for their teachers to remember that the point of all this is that we are interdependent. So our happiness is not separated from everybody else's. So whatever we want to do, we want to, we need to be a benefit to others because that's the deal.
we want to become enlightened to benefit all sentient beings. That's the ultimate.
And the reason why we have to do that is because we're all interdependent. We're interconnected. Yeah.
Is there a distinction between self-interest and self-care?
No, I think there's no difference between self-interest and self-care. What you have to look out for is self-centeredness.
In I think of my sitting here
Mhm.
as self-interest and self-care. That's my idea.
Mhm.
So I don't think of that as selfish.
I don't either.
Okay.
That's what I just said. What we want to do is
So
keep.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but to go back, why is wanting to have the benefit of a human rebirth selfish?
That's why I said it was not.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
It's self-care.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I'm correcting an earlier opinion. They use the word often, one of the early translations about all this is self-cherishing, that we cherish ourselves.
Right.
And we cherish ourselves above others. That's the key ingredient, is that we chase our own happiness above the happiness of others. And we'll extend it out a little bit to everything we consider mine. My friends, my family, my dog, all that stuff. I think because we live in a time of self-care, because self-care is important, but of course, when I think back to the Buddhist time, I don't think self-care was ever in question, What we want to distinguish is between self-indulgence, putting oneself in front of, above anybody else for that matter, is our problem with self-grasping. We go beyond just grasping at a self and other, seeing everything as separate, seeing this huge group of 8 billion human beings as 8 billion individual human beings, as if we're not interconnected, that that how we take care of ourselves doesn't matter concerning everybody else, which it does. We only have to look at things like pollution and, everything else to realize that, of course, it matters. It matters how we take care of ourselves because it impacts everybody else.
So self-care wouldn't be selfish.
That's what I'm saying.
Right, because you're doing it to be a better component of
the whole. And
group.
that's the distinction we want to keep in our minds about taking care of our own welfare in order to be able to be a real benefit to others. So we want to always keep those two thoughts together. Because it's just like when you know that you need a good night's sleep in order to drive a long distance tomorrow morning, in order to be a safe driver. It's not just about protecting yourself, it's to protect everybody else on the road, or not drinking and driving, or, whatever example you need to use for yourself to remember that it's not just about you. And it's never just about us. That's the part that I think the Mahayana tradition is trying to get us to get. I don't think it's that different from the Theravada tradition. It's just a different angle. you know. So, but I didn't study the Theravada tradition. So this idea, we really want to have a clean idea of what, self-care is versus self-centeredness versus caring for others, trying to develop our own welfare for the benefit of others, all that kind of thing. Because if we pollute it, well, that sounds selfish to me, we want to work on that. Because that's one of those ways in which we're becoming an obstacle to wanting to develop our skills. Because some people will, constantly set aside Dharma practice because, their partner wants something from them. They won't take care of what they need to do to take care of their body and mind. Now, you can't always do it. You can't follow your own schedule all the time, but you want to be aware when you're setting aside time that, or action activity that's really important to your accomplishing changing of your mind because of some immediate demand on your time. We have to be judicious in figuring out how we want to spend our time. And so one of those things is looking at whether or not we do enough self-care about, like taking care of our mind. And unfortunately, that often means getting up earlier. So you can spend some time on your mind before, you're joining in with the family activities and doing whatever else that needs to be done, So, it's like when you live in a nuns community and you're having this great experience, with your practice in the morning, and then it's time to go to puja or something, or class, and you kind of resent it, and that's wrong thinking. That's putting myself above, it's just not very wise, put it that way. So it's a balance that we have to find, and we need to be able to spot when we've crossed over to self-centeredness and even arrogance, thinking that I know how to speak. I should be able to go to class when I feel like it. Anyway, which is incredibly stupid when you're talking about a Dharma center. So, anyway, off track. So, you could say, instead of calling things like the lower scope being and middle scope and higher scope, you can just look at in terms of like beginners. Beginners need a succession of good rebirths in order to make progress on the path. What's a good rebirth?
Human.
Human rebirth's not bad.
Resource.
Perfect.
A perfect human rebirth's better. And what does that mean?
Resources,
You have resources. What kind?
time, money, food, shelter,
How about teachers?
teachers,
Time of
wisdom.
time of the Dharma being taught.
Ears.
Yeah, the faculty of hearing, the faculty of seeing. Those are all good, helpful things, tools.
A desire to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's where our aspirational prayers come in. Some of them are praying, like we're kind of going, oh, yes, may I develop these things so that, like on your deathbed, you can be thinking, oh, can't wait till I can start my next life to benefit others. And, so I need to meet my teachers, hurry, early. So, we want to, this is that habit where we want to have this mind that's always thinking in terms, I need to develop my mind so that I can be of benefit for others. And that developing my mind requires Dharma resources as well as sustaining resources. You know, you need to have food, you need to have shelter, you need to have, you know, access to things. So that's why being born in a war zone might be a great opportunity to work with your mind, but if unless you're pretty far along, it may be devastating to your progress. No, because you just don't have a condition well enough to be able to work with your mind because you're just trying to survive. So we want to create the cause for those things. So what does that take? That takes the 6 perfections. You know, you need to think about what you want to abandon and what you want to adopt. Ethics being primary, because it sort of supports everything else. So no matter what you're doing, you don't want to, like, you don't want to practice generosity by stealing something from someone else. Because
Because practicing generosity.
well, it's not. That's part of the problem. But you could say it is Robin Hood.
Yeah.
You know, but the truth of the matter is it's unethical that you're judging someone else's wealth as a means for you to be able to be generous. Now, it's particularly good in Robin Hood. You know, this is the thing about Robin Hood is Robin Hood really went from, you know, like stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. I don't think there was a lot of self-care in the middle. You know, I mean, because it's a legend. You know, obviously he had to have food too. So, and his merry men and all that. But, you know, so my is, and I, you know, sometimes have one. Yeah.
Talking about a human rebirth and I look at my own example of, you know, I am amazed that I somehow found my way to this journey.
Yep.
And I ask myself all the time, you know, how did this happen?
Yep. It's just karma ripening.
Sometime in the past.
Now, you were attracted to the teachings in some previous life, and then finally conditions came together in this life, or you had enough merit ripen, so you met them again.
But it wasn't from a positive, encouraging. It was as a
Don't put two things together. Like we might be suffering, and that's why we seek a spiritual path. But finding a spiritual path is good karma ripening. The suffering part is the bad karma ripening. They're two different things. Because many people have bad karma ripening, and there's no good karma ripening happening. Huh?
Can you have both?
We all have both.
Oh, we do.
But we don't necessarily have the ripening in this life.
Right, but can you have both?
And it's not exactly the same time. They're two different seeds ripening. A negative action cannot cause a positive effect.
Can you be born into the negative and find your way to the...
No. We're a mixed bag of things. This is why we're, you know, like those of us with good conditions who have pretty perfect human rebirths have a mixture of things ripening. We have good stuff ripen, bad stuff ripen, the whole 9 yards. We just don't have so much bad stuff ripening that we can't work on our minds. Does that make sense?
Because to me, it's kind of like, you know, the butterfly coming out of the cocoon. You know, you're born as a caterpillar and
but it's not random.
Right.
It's karma ripening.
Okay.
So your birth is a karma ripening. You know, the time of death, you ripened a seed that projects you into your next life. Such a big story. Did you have your hand up?
Oh, no, sorry.
That's all right. No, I'm, you know, y'all are wide apart. And, you know, progressive lenses, you have no I cannot pronounce that word. Peripheral vision. So, okay. So my point about this, sort of, that's not what I want to look at, is this progression of stages. But unfortunately, for most of us, it's not like we reach to a certain stage in this life and then we carry forward. It's just like waiting for a reincarnation, you know? Okay, like we find Lama Zopa Rinpoche's rebirth, right? Well, it'll be a while before he's educated and can be a teacher again, you know? And that's the way it is. So now whose fault is that? It's the lack of the merit of his students to not just meet him in a pure land with a spontaneous rebirth, to be there, fully formed. No, we need a human being because we can't see anything but a human being. So they has to be born and grow up and get educated and da 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 da. You know? Now, if you reach a certain level of the path in this very life, it's not like you die and get reborn. You know, it's like you you can become enlightened in this very life. So then you're liberated and you're enlightened. You don't come back by uncontrolled rebirth.
So are those the upper, the eighth and above movies when you're bodhisattva?
You're already liberated when you're on the eighth, ninth, and tenth. So you're no longer in under the control of uncontrolled rebirth, put it that way. So all these are, when you look at these scopes, it's a method of trying to teach the progression that has to go on. And so much of it's about the mind. Teachers are trying to get us to even care about future rebirths. Most of we're concerned about tomorrow, maybe tonight. We'll get to tomorrow later. And they want us to understand that it's not just our actions affect what happens in this life. In fact, it doesn't have a whole lot of effect on this life. We need to be concerned about the future, the long future, the big picture. When we get good at that and develop our ethics and develop the habit of a positive mind, we're creating that condition to have a series of good rebirths. And if you're born in good conditions, if you have the habit of having a positive mind, it's more likely for you to have a positive mind because you've met good conditions for that. If you have the habit of a negative mind, you might not notice, regardless of what your conditions are. But since we can't remember our past lives until we really develop our concentration to quite a high level, which means like calm abiding, the good news is when we do develop that ability to hold our attention on an object for as long as we want, without any distraction, we don't have laxity, we don't have excitement, we're just able to hold it, we will recall past lives of ourselves. And that will give us some affirmation about the teachings. It's worth getting there. And that's true whether you follow a spiritual path or not. The development of concentration removes the obstacles and the distractions that are preventing us from remembering. Yes, Natalia, creating good karma will make a good rebirth, living in a place where you can practice Dharma, not having distractions. That is, if you practice virtuous actions with the motivation of benefiting others. And you make aspirational prayers to meet the teachings and all that kind of stuff, but if we just say, we just do virtuous things like generosity, practice patience, be helpful, blah, 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 in order that we'll be rich and maybe famous and, never worry about our shelter, blah, blah, blah. In the next life, we might not meet the teachings. And we might just exhaust a lot of good karma ripening. So the two together are important, practicing ethics and remembering the spiritual goal. Yeah.
So it's like not having a dread about, I don't want to have to do this all again when I come
Well, that's
back.
that's okay. That's that fear of being, and that's part of refuge, is this idea I really don't want, and I certainly don't want a miserable human rebirth, and I don't want a miserable, I don't want to be born, I don't know, a snake or a slug. I don't know. Yeah, whatever.
Even,
Um,
I mean, or not be born at all. Like,
that's wanting to be liberated.
yeah.
So that's sort of when you get to the middle, when you can achieve that, or achieve some of the skills you need to achieve that by having a succession of good rebirths. Because in one of them, your habits that you've been developing will come through. It's like I have friends who were, started meditating at age 4. That helps a lot. So, you know, so we need that kind of ability in order to be able to develop come abiding that life. You need to be teachers that say, oh, this is the reason why you want to do it. And you don't want to do it for mundane purposes. You want to do it for spiritual purposes, so that you're creating the cause to keep getting the teachings you need and to integrate those teachings into your being, so that you can actually become liberated and then become completely enlightened for the benefit of others. So it's until we reach the level that we can actually direct our rebirth. Aryas can do that, and actually, I think even before then, you could start directing your rebirth. I mean, and so it's like, but you really have to reach a high level of mind.
So part of the early scope is renunciation, when you finally are tired of the cycle and you want to renounce samsara pleasures to escape this.
Yeah, you could say that that's the first accomplishment of when you're in the middle of the path. It's now you've got this desire to be, you don't fall for any of the sensory delights of this existence. You know that they're not really fulfilling, that they're not, it's like they're not worth the suffering we go through. So we develop, sincere desire to be liberated. We just don't fall for all that. We don't chase after worldly goods and worldly success and all that kind of thing. Then we want to be, so we can put that mind to also good use by developing our minds of compassion and love. And this leads to the mind of generating bodhicitta. Because once you really, have achieved this mind of universal love and compassion, you can see how that might the desire to help everybody would naturally arise. Not in a small little like everyday kind of way, but in this way, like I really need to become completely enlightened in order to be able to benefit all these suffering sentient beings. Yeah.
In one of the previous classes, I had mentioned that I thought that trying to become a better person was the right path. And you had mentioned that also was self-interest.
Yes, there's self-interest in that.
A selfish interest, I should say.
I don't know it. I'd have to have it verbatim to be sure. I'm not.
I know, but the question that I'm saying, or question that I'm asking is, so if you don't start meditating at 4,
No, my point is that that's sort of the beginner's mind. I want to be a better person.
right?
Okay. Which is fine. You want to combine that with a bigger goal so that it will affect your resources in the next life. So it's not just that you have good conditions and you have friends and all that kind of stuff, but you have more sort of worldly things, that there's also a spiritual element to those resources.
Right.
Yeah. So that's two minds. Not, so it is definitely self-care to want to be a better person, to get rid of, because there's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy. That's sort of the purpose of life. Or it might as well be the only, the purpose of life. What we need to understand is what really brings happiness. And that's where we're mistaken all the time. So when we're trying to develop our compassion, it's not just a simple matter of wishing people to be free of suffering. That's the wish. But when you want to have that wish to remove their suffering, then we need wisdom. Because there are all sorts of things that you can do to reduce someone's suffering that doesn't help them. I buy that man a drink.
Which is why bodhicitta isn't enough. You have to have wisdom to realize emptiness.
Right.
To
be able to effectively
aspects of
benefit.
the path.
Yeah, because right now, up until the point that you really have a direct experience of emptiness, you can make mistakes about what, is, because you're still grasping at things in an incorrect way. But when you have that direct perception, that falls apart. Because now there's nothing to grasp after. So that benefits your ability to help others in a great way. And it helps you with that wisdom of knowing you don't want to feed their grasping at a self of their child, their partner. But you have to know where the students are in order to effectively lead them out of suffering. This is why we all want Buddhas as teachers. So we have to create a lot of merit to have Buddhas as teachers. A lot of people at the time of the Buddha, they say, became enlightened. They had the merit.
But they had the Buddha.
Yes, sure. And he was unmistakably helping them. But not everybody in the presence of a Buddha had the merit to accept the teachings or put them into practice. Some people just had jealousy. And of course, Shakyamuni Buddha was born a prince. That tells you something about resources, how useful they are. He walked away from them, but he probably had really good circumstances for physical health and everything till he walked away from them. Okay, where was I going? So the wonderful thing about meeting teachings about this graduated path is that you're exposed to these teachings on all the parts, that will not only help you get, be a better person, create the cause for things like resources and, pleasant seeds ripening, all that kind of stuff, but also how to protect your mind from just being caught up in worldly concerns. So because you don't want to trade just having, ignoring your worldly concerns for this life for worldly concerns for next life. You want to have that spiritual component. You don't just want wealth for its own sake. You don't want just, delightful things to eat for its own sake. You want there to be more than that, more purpose to that. And it's really important to create the cause to meet teachings, because if you die without having developed, I don't know, a realization of emptiness,
I realize
you'll be starting, you'll need teachers to get there again. So. And after this series, what? Is there something?
That's a question.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned that you might need teachers again. So does that mean
you will need teachers again?
Yes. But do you so what you've, I guess, learned, I know things are not seen as lessons, I guess, in different lifetimes, but what wisdom or
everything could be a lesson.
Yeah, whatever you accumulated in a past life, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have access to that in the next life.
Right. Unless that's why aspirational prayers are helpful.
Yeah. So your realization, if you realize emptiness in one life and then the next life,
you'll be liberated then, so you don't have to worry.
But if you don't,
you'll need to make the progression to be. Now, you could be very far along if you have a lot of merit, because that removes obstacles.
If you were very far along and then you died and had another rebirth, would you have to start all the way from the beginning?
No, I doubt it. I suspect those are people who meet their teachers very early. Like I think about these people who, like a lot of the most senior students in the FPMT can speak Tibetan, read Tibetan, so they have, they could learn the language of their teachers. They met the Dharma in their 20s. They ordained early in life. Thubten Chodron was, I think, like 24 or something. Sangye Kadro. I mean, they were all young. Not all. That's an exaggeration. But, that's because they had gotten far along enough that the good karma ripening for them gave them access early on. So they've had a lot more time in this life to keep it going, And of course, that wasn't true for everybody. But, it's just so interesting when you realize, like if you go to a retreat with a lot of FPMT students, and you realize you're hanging around with people who, were translating for teachers and all this kind of stuff, that gives you a lot more access to the teachings if you can read the original text. So it's kind of cool. But the point is that they created the cause for that, and it ripened. And so part of that, like you kind of think about, oh, well, may I meet my teachers early in life? May I have the language of my teachers? May I have the resources to be able to receive teachings? May, whatever it is. Because these were all, the original FPMT students were all lay Westerners. They weren't monks and nuns in monasteries, because they go as children. These were young adults, on their hippie journeys through India, and Nepal, places like that. Some of them just would hear, oh, there's this cool thing going on, and 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 that's how they met Lama Yeshe or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, you know. So making these prayers of being able to meet the teachings um, and have their languages and have, have good conditions for, being able to meet the teachings early in life, and just all that stuff. So you don't make all those mistakes, like, my 20s were a disaster, so it's, you just want to, not do those. So that, this is,
But you make the point, you don't want to do that, but that's not necessarily your choice. That's your journey.
it's not just a journey. It's
And
a
I mean,
matter
in your
of,
20s, but you don't necessarily have that.
well, that's why you want conditions where you meet the teachings earlier and you have some good advice
Right.
to say, don't do that. Yeah. So that's my point. You don't have control about what karma ripens, but if you've got developed habits to respond in a different way than you did in this life in your 20s, so that you can respond differently in your 20s to your next life, that's good. But one of those conditions is something like meeting a teacher early,
Right.
a true teacher, getting good teachings, good advice, and then having, for whatever reason, you're attracted to following that teacher.
Yeah.
Yep. This is why they say it's a good idea not to disparage images of the Buddha or images of teachers, because you don't ever want to have this negative connection towards holy beings. So you don't worry about the artwork, you just accept, oh, it's a picture of Buddha, they're perfect, that kind of thing. All right. Anyway, didn't get very far tonight. Sorry about that.
Why? I thought we got there. I don't know where we're supposed to get to, but I thought it was fabulous.
So, any questions at home for this moment before we do our prayers? No. Okay. What am I doing? Wrong text. Okay. So take a moment to just rejoice in your efforts to try to understand on a tired Monday night. And pat yourself on the back for making the decision to show up and you followed through and all that kind of good stuff. So due to these merits and these virtuous actions, may we quickly attain the state of Guru Buddhas and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way that I may follow their perfect example. Because of all the merits of the 3 times created by me and all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other sentient beings, may there be no wars, famines, disease, quarreling, fighting, or unhappy minds. May there be great prosperity, and may everything needed be easily obtained. May all the human beings in the world be guided by spiritual leaders teaching only Dharma, and may everyone enjoy the happiness of Dharma. Life is holiness. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Lama-Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Ravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losam father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that's never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings who suddenly departed to peace, what a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta, the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Thanks for your efforts. We have, I think,